McKenna Show. We'll be right back on the Vicki McKenna Show. When we come back, Jim Pfaff is going to join me from Conservative Caucus. We'll start, obviously, on the speech. And as more information comes out about the Supreme Court ruling, I'll add that into the show as I get it. We'll take a break in the Vicki McKenna Show. We'll be right back. It's our pal Jim Pfaff from the Conservative Caucus to do kind of a overview of the joint address to Congress, the Democrats' behavior, if we can get to it, some of the specific policy items in the speech. Jim, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you again.
So the reaction to this speech from people who are watching the speech, and I looked at CBS. I understand CNN also had their own Insta poll. CBS had 47% Democrat or independent watching the speech and 51% Republican, but somewhere close to 76% in two categories of questions said they liked the speech. And the first was liked the speech, and the second was approved of the policy items. And so that was 75 or 76%, which definitely means some independents for sure, and maybe even some Democrats who are reacting positively to that speech last night. And you would think from the behavior of the Democrats that Donald Trump was making a declaration, to sign allegiances with the neo-Nazis.
Yeah, listen, Democrats have totally not gotten the lesson, right? They are right now clueless as to what just happened in November. They're upset. The upsetness, particularly of Congressman Al Green, who by the way, and when I was working for Thomas Massey, he was in the same condo complex I was in. Just personally, he always seemed real nice, but he's always got this agenda that's a rabid one against anything that Republicans might do. And this is kind of the insanity of the politics that we're going after here. Donald Trump is personality that rubs maybe people wrong, but at the same time, he does all the right things that the American people want. They didn't quite get it yet fully in the first iteration, but they totally get it now. And this poll after this speech proves it, in my opinion.
I think so too, because in order to get to 76%, you just had to pull in a lot of Democrats and independents into that number. Maybe all Republicans loved it. Okay, fine. Where are you getting the other 24%? I'm going to give you a quote. This is something Donald Trump said. To your point, Jim, I could find a cure to the most devastating disease, a disease that would wipe out entire nations or announce the answers to the greatest economy in history or the stoppage of crime to the lowest levels ever recorded. And these people sitting right here would not clap, would not stand, and certainly would not cheer for these astronomical achievements. I've often said this, and it's just true, that I hope Donald Trump doesn't come out in favor of shelter dogs, because the Democrats will want to kill all the shelter dogs. It's just, and that's what you were describing about Al Green. He's there as a reflexive rejection of anything Republicans do. It doesn't matter who the Republican is. And then these signs and the response that, probably nobody watched, but I watched a little of. It had nothing to do with what Donald Trump said, what he has already done. That's why they couldn't find it in themselves to applaud a kid with brain cancer last night. It's reflexive. It's mindless. It's mantra.
Yeah, and listen, I'm all for aggressive politics. I think the aggressive back and forth of people who have different opinions throughout our country's history has always been a net benefit to us, because even if you think someone's right, you just might need to cut. Even if you think you're right, you might need to cut across your rough edges. But the reality is that the politics of, well, you're that person, so you're evil and I hate you under any circumstances is not healthy in a democracy, in any kind of in a republic like we have. But the thing is, the American people are getting it, because the other half of that poll that you pointed to, does Trump spend time on issues they care about? That's 63% a lot and 28% a little. Now, you've got almost 90% of more than 90% of the people that watch that saying, yeah, we like this a lot. And so, listen, the American people are understanding what's going on. They're really ignoring Democrats right now while Democrats ignore what's going on. Right now, the mantra of Democrats is, we stand for putting men in little girls' bathrooms, and we also are for the bureaucrats. Like, that's their message right now. They can't get off of it. They won't go off of it, and they're going to pay a price at the polls.
I think so. I hope so. Actually, I was listening to the back and forth between Stephen A. Smith, who's a sports podcaster and broadcaster, and The View, as they were trying to tell him, that Donald Trump is, the end of democracy. And he said, well, wait a second. No, he's not. He won all the battleground states. He won the Electoral College. He flipped 89 counties that had previously gone down. I was really sort of surprised to see sort of that rational Democrat assert itself against woke progressivism, because woke progressivism, as we saw last night, is the operating principle of the Democratic Party. So I mean, but it's starting to wear thin. You can go to any Bill Maher program at this point, any of them at this point, and see the rejection of this. It's mindless. It's surreality. It doesn't have any tether to stuff that's going on or anything people care about. It's like they get together in one room or they all connect on Zoom, and they never bother to knock on the door of their neighbor and ask what's going on. What do what are the things that you care about? Why do you think Trump is good or bad? It's like they've never asked. Town hall meetings, I don't even think they know what they are.
Listen, the Democrats in all this century, in fact, have stood for censorship. They have stood for nearly authoritarian control of our economy. They absolutely argue everything from a Marxist perspective. Their ideology is Marxism. However they want to say what it is, however they want to represent it. And for them, it is an annoyance to have to go through elections, to have to deal with people who disagree with them. They're really petulant babies, and they don't understand how petulant they really are. They really think that they're dead serious. But the reality is that they cannot survive another election cycle acting in this manner, pushing back in this manner. By the way, we've got a short run here where we're going to see the gross domestic product go down. We're going to remain a little bit in inflation, at least at the levels that we are now. Like, we're not going to have the economic thing blowing up here in the short run. It's going to be a challenge. Donald Trump acknowledged that in his speech last night. But here's what's interesting. They're trying, and the American people are getting this. They tried, Democrats last night, including the Democrat response, tried to pin the economy on Donald Trump 1 month and a half, almost 2 months into his presidency. The absurdity of the arguments of these people is crazy. But the problem that they have, the problem, by the way, that progressive so-called Christians have, FYI, because there's a Trump derangement syndrome going on in what we call Big Eva. These people, they aren't moved by facts, thinking, logic, understanding. None of that matters to them because their deep-seated hatred of one man and anyone who would support him does not go away from them any time. That actually will not be good moving forward. We already know from November's results that it is good for Donald Trump and those who think like Donald Trump or are supportive of this agenda. That is likely to continue through 2026. By the way, things may change between now and then. There are other roadblocks to come up to. But I predict that right now, Donald Trump is focused. He's got the right people in place. I'm really, really hopeful for what's going to happen in the next 4 years. I have not had this kind of hopefulness in 30 years of doing politics. And it just seems like we might be able to get past some really huge problems in this country, back to the kind of liberty that made us a great nation.
Yeah, unless the Supreme Court decides they want, to create constitutional crises like they appeared to have done today. Put that aside for a second. Have you ever seen the Republicans that enthusiastic before? It was one thing to see the Democrats sit on their hands, doom scroll their social media feeds. I expected that, the snarkiness, the insolence, the universal childish reactions. Although I must say, watching Al Green shake his cane was just damn funny. I'm sorry. I'm laughing. He's like your stereotypical cranky old neighbor who's yelling at you to get off his lawn. It was just, I don't know. I was totally amused by that. But have you ever seen the Republicans sort of, they were so unified. It was bizarre. It was like, they were cheering on the Avengers.
Well, that's so true. I spent enough time on Capitol Hill to be amazed by how unified they are around Donald Trump. But let's be clear about this. I'm glad for it, but a lot of this is happening because of the political environment Donald Trump created by standing firm, walking with courage, and walking through one of the worst hailstorms of fire that you could ever have. There's a story of Cold Harbor, a famous battle in the Civil War, and the Union soldiers, like 25,000 of them, died in just an hour or two. And there were stories of them leaning into the big bullets coming at them by putting their arm in front of them and leaning forward, like they were literally talked like this. It's amazing when you see that kind of courage and determination. Donald Trump had that same kind of courage and determination. And there's a political benefit to it, which you pointed out earlier, and that political benefit they can't ignore. So if things were to go awry, I do not count on Republicans to stick with him like this, but I'm very glad that they're doing it now.
I totally agree. And just as you were talking, they want him to walk through the hail of bullets. They don't want to walk through the hail of bullets. Most of them, not all of them. No. There are some notable exceptions. I would put our man Senator Ron Johnson on that list, Tom Tiffany on that list. But there's some of them who would walk the plank, but most of them just want Donald Trump to do it. Hey, man, good job. Thanks for doing what you did. You hear this all the time. These brave activists, whether it's an elected person or non-elected person, like Riley Gaines, thanks for doing what you did. Why weren't you standing next to me? Because Republicans will run for the corners if they're scared, just like most human beings will. And so what I guess I hope Donald Trump does is he keeps being as aggressive and sort of offensive as he's been, because it makes it harder for those Republicans to run for the cheap seats when things get a little bit snaky out there.
Listen, and I want to reemphasize, Ron Johnson's a hero, one of the great members that we have up here, and those members can inspire these people. I was watching the ones that are weak. I was watching Donald Trump coming back down through the line after the speech, and I was looking at the various members of Congress who were greeting him, and some of them very weak, some of them wonderful, strong people. I was so glad he put his arm on the shoulder of my friend Chip Roy, for example, who had supported Ron DeSantis, but is now all on board with Trump, and they're going to have tiny disagreements, but he's all on board. But the reason I say all this, and to say it's very important, I was watching Donald Trump and how he reacts to all these people, some of whom he knows could go weak-kneed at any time. He is more focused than ever. He's more gracious than ever. And he really is bringing this party together and this coalition together. A whole lot of this is due to the leadership skills of Donald Trump, which even I'm very impressed by. I always have been, but even more so now. It's really wonderful to see.
One of the more to the point of the Democrats have just sort of they've lost it nonstop. Cheerleading, including Tony Evers and the Democratic governors, putting out statements against the United States in favor of a foreign nation after the press conference with Zelensky. After all of that nonstop media berating, phony AstroTurf pop-up protests, all coordinated to take place at the exact same time across the country, and we're supposed to believe it's organic. 76% of people say they support President Trump's agenda vis-a-vis peace between Russia and Ukraine. So not just on Ukraine, it's on most of these issues that we're talking about. As long as he gets out there and makes the case, and he's doing a brilliant job of circumventing the press, going directly to people. The rapid response team's incredible. I think I'm like you. I'm like weirdly optimistic, and I keep wondering if there's something wrong with me for being this way.
Well, we're going to look back at this time and recognize that this was one of the greatest presidencies of American history. I think many of us, like you and me, are already thinking that that's the case. And we're only a month and a half or 2 months into it. But it really, Donald Trump's journey through running in 2016, the morass of stupidity that was coming at him for 4 years, the election of 2020 that to me seems rigged and not necessarily stolen, but although I'm open to hearing that, but certainly it was rigged up to make sure that Joe Biden could win, who 4 years of whom we had to endure because he could not even be president. And now through that, Donald Trump laid out his vision in his mind and heart first through 4 years. And in planning, as he saw that he was capable of winning this thing again, and put the right team together, the right plan together. And as long as he can sustain that, and I'll give it 2 years because it is hard to sustain something like this for more than 2 years. But if he were able to sustain it for 4, we really could get back to constitutional liberty that was the guarantee of our founders. We have not been under a constitutional system for at least 50 years, certainly 30 years. And we need to get delivered from that problem. And I think Donald Trump just may be the guy to do it.
Yeah. You know what, Jim? You always got to take a moment when you see a setback like the Supreme Court decision today and say, this has been decades and decades of the Constitution being undone. It's going to, I mean, and we want it to all be fixed in 6 weeks. So it's a little unrealistic with regard to expectation. Thanks so much for joining me on the program today, Jim. Good to have you.
So glad to be with you. Thanks, Vicki.